Hey, I'm Ben Jolly. You're watching NME, and we're here with Porter Robinson. So, how are things, Porter?
Yeah, things are actually really good at the moment. Things are looking hopeful, and it's really nice to be releasing music again.
Obviously, it's been a while since your last album. So, what's been going on in the 7 years?
Yeah, well, there's a few different ways that I can talk about this, because on the one hand, a good deal of this album is about how there was a point in those 7 years where I felt really convinced that I wouldn't be able to make music ever again, and that was always my greatest fear. I was so obsessed, especially in the first 2 years, 2015, 2016, with trying to make something I could prove I could still do it, that I was just like too anxious to make anything good at all. It was really, really bad. And a lot of the album is about sort of how I clawed my way out of that. But, as a part of the process of clawing my way out of that, I did a side project in 2017 called Virtual Self. So I haven't been entirely idle. We did Shelter as well with Madian. So it's weird because I feel sometimes, especially from my audience, that there's this perception that I haven't done anything in 7 years, and I fall for it too. There'll be times where if I'm like freaked out in the studio, super frustrated, and I'll be ranting to a friend or to my manager. I'll be like, how am I supposed to do this? I haven't made an album in like 6 years, and they'll go, "What are you talking about? Like, you just did Virtual Self." So it's just kind of funny how the thinking tends to get distorted by like the narratives that are out there. Like, I'll start to believe the things that other people think at times, and so. But yeah, at the moment, it's like I've been listening to the album, and I'm just like, I think it's everything I wanted it to be, and I never thought I would say that.
What did you want it to be then?
Well, I wanted it. One of my first goals for the album was for it to be this thing that felt intimate and up close, like you could touch it. But I still wanted it to be emotional and beautiful, and I also wanted it to be much more kind of vulnerable and personal than some of the previous work. So as an example, like the last album, Worlds, was all about sort of escaping to these faraway dreamlands and these fantasy-scapes and these video game-like far-off universes. And Nurture is more about finding beauty in the everyday and in reality as it is. And as we face it, like sort of the tagline of the album is, everything we need is already here. As a part of that, I really felt that I wanted to sort of stand in front, and rather than just be, behind the decks, I wanted to sing my feelings out, and I wanted to express myself to the fullest. So it's a bit of a different role as well.
And it's interesting you say about everything's already here being the tagline, because it seems like there's a real connection to nature in terms of like the artwork, the music videos, and just the whole. Even in the first track, I think it's like the birds are tweeting kind of thing.
That's right. It's and the nature thing for me. I think as an artist, you always have these experiences where something works for you when you're in the studio, and then you're later left to sort of pick up the pieces about what did this resonate with me so much. And something with Nurture, I think nature for me is this stand-in for basically health. This idea of things being as they should be, like things being at this stasis point where everything's balanced. And I think since I was just sort of so unhealthy, and I don't mean in a fitness way, I just mean like emotionally and mentally just really unwell, and my thinking was super distorted. Nature to me was this idea of things being as they should. But it's funny because my relationship with nature is like very much through a window. I'm not this like rugged camping guy. It's like I'm sitting in my studio making music, and I see like a beautiful forest through a window. And I sort of try to represent that in various ways in the, as you mentioned, with the single art and the music videos. It's never like I'm exploring the woods. It's more like there's this little slice of nature, this little portal, like a little window. And that's what I see. And to me, that's like what that represents is that little window of nature that you would see on the single covers, or this little window of nature that you see in the music videos. It's like the things you choose to show as an artist. The relationship to nature is kind of twofold. One, it sort of represents health, but it also represents like the things we choose to show. And in my case, I think I'm choosing to show beauty first and foremost.
So would you say like creating this album's kind of given you a renewed sense of life, I suppose?
I 100%. I would say so. Yeah. I mean, it's like, it's funny because I sort of had to hit a bit of a rock bottom with the creativity in order to find the footing to move forward. And the vast majority of this album was made in the last 3 years. Before that, I thought what I needed to do was just work harder and spend more time in the studio, just grinding. Like, I thought, if I can't do this working 6 hours a day, then I have to work 12. And that was the opposite of what I needed to do. In fact, the real problem there was that by like working so much, trying to prove myself, I wasn't like having normal life experiences. I wasn't going out and falling in love. I wasn't, listening to other albums for inspiration or watching new movies or seeing new places. And all of that is like the raw material from which creativity can grow. It was just like, I was like basically running on empty and beating my head against the wall. So the real work I had to do in this album was like learning to appreciate life without the constant like validation and constant creative highs and lows. It's almost just like go experience some IRL stuff, like get off Twitter and kind of realize that, whether or not you make music, you're going to be okay. The reason the music sounds so sunny is because I think it was like all I could tolerate when I was at that low point. It was like I needed something that sounded so hopeful and so kind of sweet. I just wanted these sweet major key songs. That was what made my heart soar. Is the thing that made me feel kind of teary. And then in the lyrics, that's where I would try to inject some pain. Even though the lyrics are on the whole quite hopeful, I also tend to give a voice to this negative internal monologue a lot, I think, through the lyrics. And that's where there's like those lyrics that I would write that I felt like kicked me in the stomach when I would sing them. I'd be, like that kind of feeling. That's sort of what was there to balance out the sweetness.
And getting back to piano, I suppose that kind of really helped as well, like kind of moving away from the EDM kind of side of things. You're absolutely right. I knew that I wanted this record to have a less dancey sound, and I think the biggest way that manifests is through the fact that like most of the songs, regardless of how they're produced and regardless of what kind of instrumentation they use, they don't really have like drops. Instead, they have these like choruses. Learning to write like choruses, I think, was another thing that kind of took some years to do. Like just going from producing so much like instrumental music and sort of drop driven music over the years, like I thought that I should be able to just go ahead and write a chorus, but it actually took some developing the skill. Like it's not as easy as you might think. So yeah, and then I tried to use more physical sounding instruments, like more real pianos and more samples and less synths, for sure. It felt more in that world. It felt less dreamlike and more up close and intimate. So that's why I tended to reach for those sorts of sounds. Yeah. And you've been doing a lot of virtual stuff, haven't you, throughout lockdown? How's that kind of thing helped you with Secret Sky? And I'm sure you did something with PC Music as well, with AG?
Yeah. So I run this music festival. I do a yearly music festival in Oakland called Second Sky, and we did the online version of it called Secret Sky. Yeah, we did have AG Cook on the festival, and he debuted a lot of the music for Seven, and it was incredible. He started off doing this acoustic guitar singer songwriter stuff, and then it devolved into this crazy super song music where it's like just like AG Cook doing everything all at once. It was before I think we had the context of Seven to know what he had been up to. That performance absolutely blew my mind. Yeah. So I've done the virtual festival last year. I've also been spending a good amount of time in social VR where, I've been in VR and you can like be any kind of character you want and go to any world you want. And there's a real community there. I've like made friendships that only exist in VR, and I don't know these people in real life. I don't know their real names. And, in VR, you can all go and play billiards together, or you can, I don't know, people play like spin the bottle and stuff like that. It's like people live there are people who are in relationships only in VR. It's this whole new world. And to me, the reason why it's so magical for me is like, I remember the internet before it was so centralized, before the internet was based around these basically 4 companies that everyone is putting their content onto for free, and then they profit from our data and the content that we put up there. Like it used to be so largely peer-to-peer or on these decentralized forums out there. And I just feel like the internet in a lot of ways didn't deliver on the promise that it once showed. And VR is sort of in that similar honeymoon state right now, in my opinion, where it's sort of transitioning out of this state now, but it's in this phase where the people who are making content for VR have such a high degree of sincerity around what they're doing, and they're making stuff because they're passionate about it, and the rules aren't quite figured out yet. And it reminds me of the early internet. Sorry, I just got like an email, made a crazy buzzing in my phone. But yeah, it reminds me of the early internet.
With obviously everything starting to open up, how are you feeling about like post-COVID dance culture and like nightlife?
You know, with the lockdown, a year of not going out, like I can tell that my desire for dance music is like a lot higher than it's been before. I'm like, ooh, like that sounds pretty nice. Like having a bit of fun sounds really cool. So, you know, I never know what the thing I'm going to do next is. And sometimes I find myself wishing like that God could come down and show me right now, like this is what your next album is going to sound like, and then wipe my memory so I could experience it. Because I you know, you spend thousands of hours on something, you totally lose perspective on what it really is. So I have no idea how my songs truly sound, I think. But I think there's a decent chance of the next thing I'm doing being pretty fun, because like, that's what I'm in the mood for. I'm like, when I listen to music these days, I'm listening to like honestly, like my default thing that I'll put on will be like Playboi Carti and like Bladee, basically. Like I just want to listen to like that's what I'm in the mood for at the moment. It's just like, it's what makes me feel good, and I'm always sort of chasing that. So who knows, maybe I start rapping 2022.
Why not?